Boston, Massachusetts, 1953. In the 2 years since the House Un-American Activities Committee intensified its crusade, 681 careers had been destroyed. That was the official count. Dry numbers in manila folders. But behind each number stood a story. And the story of one woman transcended the boundaries of imagination. Imagine a woman who didn't just lose her husband. She methodically, year after year, seduced and married each of the 3 men who had signed his fatal accusation. And each of them met their end by their own hand on their wedding night. This is the story of Eleanor Hartwell, a literature professor from a quiet New England town who became the most sophisticated instrument of personal vengeance in the history of the Red Scare. Let's return to the beginning. If you're loving the content, make sure to subscribe right now so you don't miss us in your recommendations. We upload new, exciting videos every day. Thank you for watching. Let's get into it. Summer 1952. A brownstone apartment in Beacon Hill. Eleanor Frances Hartwell, 29, taught comparative literature at Wellesley College. Each morning she brewed coffee in her percolator, pressed her cream-soaked blouse, a gift from Warren for their anniversary, and drove her used Plymouth to campus. Her husband, Warren James Hartwell, worked as an aerospace engineer at the Raytheon facility in Waltham. Tall, broad-shouldered, with an easy smile and a habit of reciting Whitman over dinner. Their apartment, 3 rooms overlooking Charles Street, overflowed with books. Hemingway next to Fitzgerald, Dickinson beside technical manuals for radar systems. Their neighbor, Mrs. Patricia Donnelly, would tell investigators 20 years later, they were like 2 doves, always together. He'd come home from work, she'd greet him at the door. She'd return from lectures, he'd already have the coffee going. We all envied them, the good kind of envy. August 18th, 1952, Monday. Warren left for work as usual, kissed his wife, grabbed his briefcase full of circuit diagrams for a new radar component. At the threshold, he turned back. Ellie, I'll be late tonight. Staff meeting. There was indeed a meeting, an emergency session to denounce Stanley Kovacs, the senior engineer. Accusations of communist sympathies. Someone had seen him at a Paul Robeson concert in 1946. They demanded signatures on a statement requesting his immediate termination and possible prosecution. Warren refused. I've worked with Stan for 8 years, he said, according to eyewitness accounts. He's one of the most patriotic men I know. Fought in the Pacific. The room went silent. The company's security liaison, Harlan Burke, slowly pronounced, Mr. Hartwell, are you refusing to support the defense of American values? I'm refusing to lie, Warren replied. At 6 a.m., they came for him. Mrs. Donnelly remembered. The doorbell rang and rang. Eleanor flew into the hallway in her nightgown, barefoot, face white as chalk. She knew. We all knew. 3 men in dark suits, FBI credentials, a search warrant. They turned the apartment upside down. Books thrown from shelves, mattress slashed, coat linings ripped open, looking for evidence of un-American activities. They found a copy of The Grapes of Wrath with an inscription. To my Ellie, who understands Steinbeck better than any critic. Your W. Steinbeck, one agent said, pocketing the book. Known fellow traveler. Warren had 5 minutes to pack. He dressed, kissed his wife. Eleanor clung to him silently, tearlessly. The tears would come later. He whispered, whatever happens, live. Promise me you'll live. The next 2 months were waiting. Eleanor, like thousands of other wives, sat through congressional hearings, courthouse corridors, attorney consultations. Warren was charged under the Smith Act, conspiracy to advocate the overthrow of the government. The evidence? his refusal to sign the loyalty oath, his Steinbeck book, a dinner party in 1947 where someone allegedly made pro-Soviet remarks. Eleanor was dismissed from Wellesley on the third day. Dean Robertson, a man she'd considered a friend, couldn't meet her eyes, mumbled something about the board's decision. Colleagues crossed the street to avoid her. Only the elderly janitor, Mrs. O'Brien, pressed a $20 bill into her coat pocket. "Hang in there, dear." October 22nd, 1952. The verdict came down. Guilty on all counts. 20 years in federal prison. The woman behind Eleanor in the courtroom, experienced, this was her third husband facing charges, grabbed her arm. "Honey, that's not 20 years. Men like that don't last 20 months inside." Warren was sent to Lewisburg Federal Penitentiary in Pennsylvania. Eleanor visited once a month, the maximum allowed. Each time Warren looked thinner, more hollow. The guards watched everything. Conversations were monitored. On March 15th, 1953, she received a telegram. "Regret to inform you, Warren Hartwell deceased, March 14th. Apparent suicide. Stop. Body available for claim. Stop." Eleanor didn't scream, didn't faint. She sat at the kitchen table and wrote one word on a piece of paper. "Find them." The prison report said suicide by hanging, but another inmate released years later told a different story. Warren had been beaten by guards, left in solitary for days, denied medical care for pneumonia. When he finally died, they called it suicide to avoid investigation. Eleanor spent the next 3 months doing the impossible, learning the names of the executioners. The system was designed to diffuse responsibility. Congressional committees, FBI agents, company security officers, judges, everyone played their part. She started with a records clerk at the federal courthouse. Martin Schultz, 60 years old, alcoholic with a pension barely covering his gin habit. Eleanor tracked his route from office to bar. At O'Malley's Tavern, 3 blocks from the courthouse, she accidentally ended up at the neighboring booth. "Rough day?" she asked when he ordered his third whiskey. "Every day's rough," he muttered. For 2 weeks, she came to the same tavern, listened to his drunken complaints about bosses, about life, about the damned paperwork where people's lives were reduced to case numbers and rubber stamps. On the 3rd week, he started revealing details. "You know how many convictions I process daily? 30, sometimes 50. Name, charge, sentence. Smith Act violations, membership in subversive organizations, all abbreviations to make it faster." "Who signs off on them?" He poured another drink. "The triumvirate, that's what we call them. Harlan Burke from company security, he initiates. Detective Cornelius Wade from Boston PD Red Squad, he investigates. And Judge Everett Blackwood, he sentences. Same 3 faces, day after day. Burke, Wade, Blackwood. Eleanor memorized the names. A week later, Martin Schultz died of liver failure. She was the only one at his funeral. Now she needed details. Through a former student working at the Boston Public Library, she accessed newspaper archives, public records, society pages. Harlan Burke, 37, head of security at Raytheon, former Army intelligence, decorated in the war, divorced twice, no children, known to frequent the Parker House bar on Friday nights. Cornelius Wade, 44, detective, Boston Police Department, Communist Infiltration Unit, married, 3 daughters, church-going Catholic, coached Little League on weekends. Judge Everett Blackwood, 52, Federal District Court, appointed by Truman, ironically, widower, son studying at Harvard Law, published articles on constitutional limits of political freedom. 3 lives, 3 targets. Eleanor began with Burke. He was the most accessible. Single man with a taste for bourbon and pretty women. Every Friday after work, cards at the Union Club. After cards, dinner at Loch Ober. After dinner, either home or to some woman's apartment. She watched him for a month, studied his patterns, tastes, weaknesses. Burke loved being admired, loved talking about the importance of his work, loved feeling like he held people's fates in his hands. In April 1953, Eleanor Hartwell ceased to exist. She became Vivian Cross, a brunette with a low voice and sad eyes, cocktail waitress at Loch Ober, a girl with a story of loss who understood so well the loneliness of Security Chief Burke. The restaurant manager hired her without questions. In those times, people learned not to ask about the past. Everyone had skeletons. Everyone had ghosts. First contact came after 3 weeks. Burke sat at his usual table. Friday, 10 p.m. Half a bottle of Maker's Mark already gone. "Anything else, sir?" Vivian Eleanor leaned down slightly lower than necessary. He looked up, assessed the neckline, the curve of her throat, the melancholy smile. "Sit down," he ordered, not asked. "I'm working." "I said, sit. Or should I have a word with your manager?" She sat. He poured her bourbon. "What's your name, beautiful?" "Vivian." "I'm Harlan, security chief at Raytheon. I protect America from threats." He leaned closer. "Important work? Dangerous work." "That must be so difficult," Vivian said with the admiration he mistook for genuine. "Difficult, but necessary. Someone has to get their hands dirty so everyone else can sleep safe." Interesting choice of words. Get their hands dirty. He knew what he did, understood it, and did it anyway. The next 2 months followed the classic seduction script. Eleanor played the working-class girl dazzled by the powerful security man. She laughed at his crude jokes, marveled at his stories of exposing communist cells, showed fear when he described interrogation techniques. "We have ways of making people talk," he boasted over dinner one night. "Sleep deprivation works wonders. 48 hours without rest, a man will say anything." "What if someone's innocent?" "Innocent people don't get investigated," Burke said flatly. Then, after a pause, quieter, "And if they do, well, there are quotas to meet. Washington wants results." In June, he proposed, bought an expensive ring, clearly not on a security officer's salary. Eleanor didn't ask where the money came from. She knew. Property seized from accused communists, divided among investigators. "Marry me, Viv." He got down on one knee in the middle of the restaurant. The whole place applauded. "Yes," Eleanor said. And the tears everyone mistook for joy were real. Tears of rage. The wedding in August. Burke wanted a celebration. First time marrying for love, not convenience. Invited colleagues, FBI agents, other security chiefs, police detectives. They came. Refusing an invitation from Harlan Burke was dangerous. Eleanor memorized their faces, all part of the machine that destroyed lives. They drank to the happy couple, not knowing the bride had already planned the wedding night to the minute. Suite at the Ritz-Carlton, champagne, roses, silk sheets. Burke was happy as a child. "I thought love wasn't for me," he said, covering her with kisses. "After everything I've seen, everything I've done, I thought I was incapable of feeling. But you brought back my soul." The irony. She was about to take that soul. "Harlan," she said when he reached to unzip her dress. "Wait, I need to tell you something." "What is it, sweetheart?" And then she told him who she was, why she came, what choice he now faced. Burke's face cycled through emotions in seconds. Confusion, incomprehension, recognition, horror, and finally, animal fear. Eleanor Hartwell. He said it like an incantation, as if trying to ward off a nightmare. Warren's wife. The engineer. March 53. She sat across from him in her white wedding dress, grotesque contrast to what was happening in this room. Pulled out a photograph of Warren from her purse, placed it on the nightstand between two champagne flutes. Look at him carefully. This is the man you killed. I was following orders. It was my job. Eleanor laughed. Quietly, terribly, as if something inside her was laughing, not her, something she'd become over these months. Your job. You know what Warren did at his job? Designed radar systems that would protect American pilots. And you? You destroyed a good man because he wouldn't lie. She told him about the months of surveillance, the evidence she'd collected, his affairs with witnesses in exchange for favorable testimony, the bribes he took from accused men desperate to clear their names, the woman, Sarah Mitchell, who'd killed herself after Burke threatened to accuse her elderly parents unless she testified against her husband. You have a choice. Eleanor placed a bottle of pills on the nightstand. Barbiturates. Quick death. 30 minutes and it's over. Or I send everything I have to the FBI, to Congress, to every newspaper in Boston. You know what they'll do to you. Prison. Your own methods used against you. Burke stared at the pills, hypnotized. Why? He whispered. Why not just kill me yourself? Because I'm not a murderer. I'm giving you what you never gave Warren, a choice. Die with some dignity or die screaming in a cell. She walked out. In the hallway, music drifted from another party. Somewhere, people celebrated another wedding. Life continued. For everyone except those whose names ended up in Burke's files. 10 minutes later, she heard glass breaking in the suite, then silence. The maid found the body in the morning. Suicide on the wedding night, an incredible scandal. But Eleanor played her role flawlessly. Hysterics, fainting, attempted jump from the window. Doctors diagnosed severe shock. In Burke's pocket, they found a suicide note. Eleanor had forged his handwriting after months of studying his letters. Can't live with what I've done anymore. Forgive me. The FBI quickly buried the case. Suicide of an agent was a stain on the Bureau's reputation. Quiet funeral, no honors. Eleanor stood at the grave in a black veil. No one knew that in her purse lay a list. 2 more names. 2 more unpaid deaths. Hartford, Connecticut, September 1953. Detective Cornelius Wade proved more complicated than Burke. Where Burke was crude and direct, Wade represented a different kind of monster, the righteous persecutor, a man who genuinely believed he was saving America, who took his daughters to Mass every Sunday and signed arrest warrants every Monday. Eleanor became Margaret Sullivan, a widow whose husband died in Korea. Perfect cover for meeting a patriotic detective. She found work as a secretary at Hartford City Hall, 3 floors below Wade's office in the municipal building. Wade was methodical as clockwork. Every Tuesday at 3 p.m. he filed his weekly reports. Every Thursday he attended the Elks Lodge meeting. Every Saturday he coached his daughter's softball team. Every Sunday, Mass at St. Patrick's Cathedral, then family dinner at his mother-in-law's house in West Hartford. Eleanor watched him for weeks, studied his routine, his relationships, his one weakness, pride in his work. Wade kept meticulous files on every investigation. At home, in his study, according to the cleaning lady Eleanor befriended. Files that could implant him if they ever came to light. Their meeting was staged to perfection. St. Patrick's Cathedral, Wednesday evening. Wade came alone, outside his usual Sunday routine. Eleanor had learned he visited midweek when troubled by a case. She was kneeling in a pew, rosary in hand, tears on her cheeks. Real tears, not hard to summon when she thought of Warren. "Are you all right, ma'am?" Wade's voice, genuinely concerned. Eleanor looked up. "I'm sorry, I lost my husband. Korea. Sometimes it overwhelms me. Wade sat beside her, respectful distance. I'm sorry for your loss. My brother served in the Pacific. I understand. Over the next months, they became friends. Nothing inappropriate. Wade was a faithful husband. But friendship, in some ways, was more dangerous. Eleanor attended his daughter's games, met his wife Patricia, helped organize the church bake sale, became part of the community fabric, and gradually Wade began to confide in her. His doubts, his nightmares. Sometimes I wonder, he said one evening after a particularly difficult case, if we've gone too far. There was a professor last week, taught philosophy at Trinity College. We arrested him because he assigned Marx in a political theory class. Just reading Marx, Margaret, not advocating it, teaching students to think critically. But you're protecting America, Eleanor said carefully. Am I? Or am I destroying what makes America worth protecting? He looked haunted. Free thought. Free speech. Aren't those the things we're supposed to be defending? Eleanor recorded everything. The pocket tape recorder, new technology, hidden in her purse. Wade's confessions, his admission that quotas existed. 10 communists exposed per month or face questions about your own loyalty. His story about falsifying evidence when a quota came up short. There was this engineer, Wade said one night, not knowing he was speaking to that engineer's widow. Hartwell. Warren Hartwell. Good man, by all accounts. War veteran, but he refused to sign a loyalty oath. Stood up for a colleague. We needed numbers that month. I enhanced the evidence, made it look worse than it was. Eleanor's hands clenched so tight her nails drew blood. What happened to him? Prison. He died there. Suicide, officially. Wade's voice dropped. But I heard things about what happens inside. The guards, they're harder on the political prisoners. I don't think he killed himself. Does that bother you? Long silence. Every single day. In February 1954, Wade's mother-in-law died. His wife, Patricia, took the girls to Providence for the funeral, would be gone a week. Wade invited Margaret to dinner at his home. Purely innocent, he assured her, but he couldn't bear the empty house. Eleanor came with a casserole and a plan. Over dinner, she listened to more confessions. Wade was breaking under the weight of what he'd done. The good Catholic boy who'd become an instrument of oppression, who saw the faces of his victims in his daughter's eyes. I keep a record, he said suddenly, after his third whiskey, of everything. Every case, every person, what we really found versus what we reported. I tell myself it's insurance, but really, he looked at her. Really, it's for when I finally have to face God. So I can't pretend I didn't know. Where do you keep these records? In my study. Locked cabinet. He gave a bitter laugh. Hidden from my wife, from the bureau. 47 files. 47 lives I helped destroy. Some guilty, most not. May I see them? Wade looked at her surprised. Why would you want to? Because my husband died in Korea fighting for freedom, Eleanor said, voice steady. And I want to know if that freedom still exists, or if we've become what we're fighting against. He was drunk enough, broken enough to show her. The study. Paneled walls, Red Sox pennants, photos of his daughters, and a locked cabinet containing the evidence of systematic persecution. Eleanor photographed everything while Wade slumped in his chair, whiskey glass empty, eyes closed. Case files, falsified evidence, quotas, names of people whose lives were destroyed based on fabricated charges. Warren's file was there. She held it with shaking hands, saw how Wade had taken Warren's principled stand and twisted it into evidence of communist sympathy. How he'd invented a network of subversives at Raytheon based on nothing but Warren's lunch conversations. "Cornelius," she said softly. He opened his eyes. "My name isn't Margaret Sullivan. It's Eleanor Hartwell." The color drained from his face. "Oh, God. Oh, God. Warren Hartwell, you're his widow. And I've been documenting you, Cornelius, just like you documented all those innocent people." She placed her tape recorder on his desk, pressed play. His own voice, confessing to falsified evidence, to knowingly destroying innocent lives. "What do you want?" he whispered. "I want you to understand what you did. To Warren, to hundreds of others." She stood. "I could send these files to the newspapers, to Congress. You'd lose everything, your job, your pension, your freedom. Your daughters would grow up knowing their father was a liar and a fraud who sent innocent men to their deaths." Wade's hands covered his face. "Please, don't hurt my family. They're innocent." So was Warren. "I know. God help me, I know." Eleanor placed a bottle of pills on the desk. "Or you can do this. Write a full confession. Mail these files to the ACLU, to the press, to anyone who might stop this madness. Then take these pills. It'll look like a heart attack. Your family will get your pension. Your daughters won't know. But the truth will come out. You can do one good thing before you die." Wade looked at the pills, then at the files, then at Eleanor. "If I do this, will you forgive me?" "No, but Warren might have. He was better than both of us." She left Wade in his study, drove through Hartford's quiet suburbs, past houses with lights on, families having dinner, children doing homework. Normal life, continuing. The next morning, Patricia Wade returned home early, worried because Cornelius hadn't answered the phone. She found him in his study, slumped over his desk. Beside him, a 40-page confession and stamped envelopes addressed to 6 newspapers and 3 civil liberties organizations. "Heart attack," the coroner said. "Stress from overwork." But 2 weeks later, the Hartford Courant published a bombshell exposé. "Detective's deathbed confession reveals falsified communist charges." Wade's files, his confession, all of it. Names cleared, cases reopened, lives beginning to rebuild. Eleanor read the article in a diner in New Haven, halfway to her next destination. One name down, one to go. And the hardest of all. Providence, Rhode Island, March 1954. Judge Everett Blackwood was the architect of it all, the one who gave legal legitimacy to the witch hunt. Harvard-educated, eloquent, righteous. A man who genuinely believed that protecting America required sacrificing individual freedoms. The Constitution he'd written was not a suicide pact. Eleanor became Katherine Wendell, paralegal at a firm that appeared before Judge Blackwood's court. Quiet, competent, nearly invisible. She filed motions, researched precedents, sat in the gallery during hearings. Blackwood never noticed her. She was furniture, part of the courtroom architecture. But Eleanor noticed everything. How Blackwood's face remained impassive when sentencing men to prison. How he lunched alone, ate the same sandwich from the same deli every day. How he spent evenings in his chambers, reading law reviews, preparing opinions. His son Robert was his only vulnerability, a second-year student at Harvard Law, following in his father's footsteps, Blackwood's pride and joy. Eleanor didn't want to touch the son, but Robert became the key when, in April, he published a law review article, Reconsidering McCarthyism, Constitutional Rights in the Security State. A critique, gentle but clear, of everything his father stood for. The article caused a sensation in legal circles. Blackwood didn't acknowledge it publicly, but Eleanor saw the change. The judge looked older, shoulders more stooped. He started making mistakes in court, citing wrong precedents, granting continuances he never would have before. One evening, as Eleanor worked late filing documents, she found Blackwood still in his chambers at 10 p.m. The door was open. He sat in darkness, staring at nothing. "Judge Blackwood? Are you all right?" He looked up, barely seeing her. "My son thinks I'm a monster." "I'm sure that's not—" "No. He's right." Blackwood gestured to his desk, covered with case files. 17 years on the bench. 643 cases under the Smith Act, the McCarran Act, loyalty proceedings. I sent over 300 people to prison. Destroyed countless careers. All legal, all constitutional, according to my interpretation. Eleanor stepped into the office. "You were protecting the country." "Was I?" He picked up his son's law review article, pages worn from rereading. Or was I protecting my own fear, my own career? It was easier to go along, to interpret the Constitution narrowly, than to stand alone and say, "This is wrong." He looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. "Do you know what my son wrote in his article?" He wrote that the greatest threat to freedom isn't external enemies. It's good people who convince themselves that evil is necessary. "What will you do?" "I don't know. I can't undo what I've done. I can't bring back those 643 lives I helped destroy." Eleanor made her decision then. Not revenge. Something different. "Judge Blackwood, there's something I need to tell you." She told him everything. Who she was, what she'd done to Burke and Wade, the evidence she had against him, recordings from his chambers, witnesses who would testify to his prejudicial rulings, his closed-door meetings with FBI agents to coordinate cases. Blackwood listened without interruption. When she finished, he was silent for a long time. "You're here to kill me." "I'm here to give you a choice. The same choice you never gave Warren or the hundreds of others." "What choice?" Eleanor placed an envelope on his desk. Not pills, not poison. Something else entirely. "Resign from the bench. Announce you're stepping down due to health reasons. Then spend the rest of your life doing what you should have done all along, defending the accused. Use your legal mind to undo some of the damage you caused. Pro bono, civil liberties work, helping people clear their names." "And if I refuse?" "Then everything I have goes public. Your son will know exactly what kind of man his father is. Your legacy will be destroyed. You'll face possible prosecution for judicial misconduct." Blackwood opened the envelope. Inside, a draft resignation letter and a recommendation letter addressed to the ACLU offering his services as a consulting attorney. "Why not just kill me?" he asked, "like the others?" "Because you have something they didn't. A son who still believes you can be better, who wrote that article hoping you'd read it. Don't waste that." Blackwood sat with his head in his hands for several minutes. Then he picked up a pen. "Will you tell my son about what I did, about Hartwell and the others?" "That's for you to decide. But I think Robert already knows. He's just waiting to see what you'll do about it." Judge Everett Blackwood resigned from the Federal District Court on April 15, 1954, citing health concerns. He spent the next 18 years working with the ACLU, helping overturn wrongful convictions, defending civil liberties, teaching law students about the dangers of sacrificing freedom for security. He never spoke publicly about why he changed. But in 1972, shortly before his death, he wrote a memoir, The Judge's Confession: How I Failed Justice. In it, he detailed every case, every wrong decision, every life he'd helped destroy. And he dedicated it to Warren Hartwell and the hundreds of others I failed. and to the woman who gave me a chance to become worthy of my robes. Eleanor read the memoir in her small apartment in Portland, Maine. She was 63 now, living under her fourth identity, working as a librarian. The final chapter of Blackwood's memoir mentioned her, though not by name. I was shown mercy by someone who had every right to destroy me. She taught me that justice isn't about punishment. It's about redemption for the accused and sometimes for the accusers, too. Eleanor closed the book, thought about Warren, about Burke, about Wade, about Blackwood, about the widow's ledger that could never truly balance. Outside her window, the Atlantic Ocean stretched toward the horizon. The Red Scare was over, officially. McCarthy had fallen, the hearings had ended. But the scars remained. The careers destroyed, the suicides, the families broken. And Eleanor Hartwell, who'd spent years becoming other women, finally began to remember who she'd been before all this. A literature professor who believed in words, in stories, in the possibility of redemption. She picked up a pen and began to write. Not for publication, just for herself. The whole story from beginning to end. A widow's testament to her husband. A warning to the future. A reminder that justice and vengeance are not the same thing, though they sometimes wear the same face. She titled it, The Widow's Ledger, an accounting of loss and mercy, and she dedicated it to Warren, who taught me that choosing to live is harder than choosing to die, and to everyone who stood up when it cost them everything. Epilogue. Boston, 2003. Sarah Blackwood, granddaughter of Judge Everett Blackwood, stood in the Boston Public Library for a ceremony honoring victims of the Red Scare. She held a manuscript, her grandfather's unpublished papers recently donated to the library's special collection. Among the papers, she'd found something extraordinary, a thin file marked E.H. Inside, dozens of letters exchanged between her grandfather and a woman who signed only with initials. Letters spanning 18 years, discussing law, justice, redemption. The last letter, dated 1972, included a photograph of a middle-aged woman and a younger man beside a grave marker. On the back of the photo, in her grandfather's handwriting, Eleanor Hartwell, 1975, finally at peace with the one she never stopped loving. She taught me that mercy is the hardest justice of all. Sarah had researched the name, found the case files, pieced together the story, and now, standing before a room full of historians, civil liberties advocates, and children of the accused, she told it. My grandfather did terrible things, she began. He enabled a witch hunt. He destroyed lives from behind the sanctuary of a judicial bench. But he was also given a chance to change by a woman who had every right to hate him, to destroy him. Eleanor Hartwell chose mercy over vengeance, redemption over revenge. And in doing so, she saved not just my grandfather's soul, but the lives of hundreds of people he later helped free. She held up Warren Hartwell's photograph found in the archives. This man, Warren Hartwell, died because he refused to lie. His wife, Eleanor, could have become a monster in response. Instead, she became something more complex, a force for both justice and mercy. Her story isn't comfortable. It doesn't fit neatly into categories of hero or villain, but it's human. And it's a reminder that how we respond to injustice defines us as much as the injustice itself. After the ceremony, an elderly woman approached Sarah. She must have been 90, white-haired, leaning on a cane. I knew her, the woman said softly. Eleanor. I was one of the people she helped. Later, after the judges and policemen. She didn't just seek revenge, she built a network. We called ourselves the Widows. We helped families escape persecution, forged documents, warned people before arrests, saved maybe 200 lives between 1954 and 1960. Are you the only one left? Of the original group, yes. But we taught others. The work continued. Some would say it still continues, wherever people face persecution for their beliefs. The old woman pressed a folded paper into Sarah's hand. Eleanor asked me to give this to anyone who told her story. She wrote it in 1975, shortly before she died. Sarah unfolded the paper, shaky handwriting but clear. To whoever reads this, I am not a hero. I am a widow who lost herself in grief and rage, who did terrible things in the name of justice. I gave 3 men a choice, but I took that choice from Warren. I created a ledger I could never balance. But I learned something through all of this. Vengeance is a circle. It goes around and around, creating new widows, new orphans, new rage. Someone has to break the circle. Someone has to choose mercy, even when mercy is undeserved. Warren would have broken the circle. He tried to, and it killed him. I broke it eventually, but not before I'd spun it a few more times. If you're reading this, maybe you're facing injustice. Maybe you want revenge. I understand. I lived it. But I'm asking you, break the circle. Be better than your enemies. Be better than I was. Choose mercy. It's harder than vengeance, but it's the only thing that heals. Eleanor Frances Hartwell, 1975. Sarah folded the letter carefully. Behind her on the library wall projected photographs of the Red Scare victims, faces of ordinary people caught in extraordinary paranoia. Teachers, engineers, actors, writers. Americans who paid the price for other Americans' fear. And among them, one photograph stood out. Warren and Eleanor Hartwell on their wedding day, 1949. Young, hopeful, innocent of what was coming. A reminder, not just of what was lost, but of what was learned. That justice without mercy is just another form of cruelty. And that sometimes the hardest choice is choosing not to destroy the people who destroyed you.